One of the hot topics at Frontiers in Optics 2012, the Optical Society's annual meeting, was the use of silk from both worms and spiders in optics applications. I spoke with Fiorenzo Omenetto of Tufts University, who pioneered the field of silk optics, about his Phototalk and asked him how his lab is using it as a material for photonics and high technology applications.
So right now we're working on making more sophisticated structures, I guess out of silk, and we're looking at how we can really integrate some of these optical components with within living tissue, and trying to look at how these components how these new optics in silk could give us information about, for example, infection, or could even tell us how a drug is being delivered.
There was also another group that was from France that gave a presentation on uses of spider silk, and your group uses silkworm silk. So I'm wondering, what's the difference between the two types of silk?
So there's a little bit of structural difference, but the main reason why we do use silkworm silk is that we have a lot of it available. There's not a lot of there's not a lot of spider silk available today. Spiders are not the friendliest creatures to actually have produced a lot of material. So silkworm silk, being a commodity material, is very advantageous to us, and with the post processing, so with melting the silk and going back to the silk solution, and then using that as our starting point, we can actually get to materials that mimic, in a certain sense, the spider silk behavior by processing what we have. So.
Yeah, I was reading that spider farms aren't likely to happen since they like to eat each other.
Yeah, it's not. It's sometimes that could hurt. Yes.
Are there any limitations in the silk that you get from your materials in terms of making those for a mass application?
Well, right now, I mean, I think that for now we're okay. So the current status of the industry is that silk is a commodity material, and so there's an immense quantity available that is geared to the textile industry. Now, if we go towards devices and we think about devices that are going to be pervasive, like, I don't know, like cell phone screens, then it's a different story. Then probably some biochemical synthesis and some artificial synthesis methods have to come to our rescue.
So what do you see as being the first practical application of the technology? And do you have any items in your lab that you're working on right now that you could perhaps show us?
Well, so I think that in fact some of the nice applications that we are working on have joined not only optics but also electronics. So it's a combination of materials that can be implanted and then gradually resorb over time and disappear. And so the things that we're working on are for example implantable heaters that come from a combination of say a wireless receiving coil that is built on a film of silk that then goes under the skin and then heats up on command and mitigates infection at its implantation site. By the same token, right now we're working also on optical relay systems. So, for example, on reflectors, silk reflectors that can be implanted and then can send back more information, more optical information when they're left under the skin, for example, and then interrogated from the outside with an ordinary light source.
So what do you think would be one of the first applications we might see, and how long do you think it will be before we see it?
Well, I think one of the big advantages of silk is this way of interfacing with living tissue. Anything that becomes an implantable medical device then has to go through a regulatory process. So whereas the prototypes are in a reasonably advanced stage right now, the regulatory path is going to be followed, and so that has generally a fairly long time. I would say 5 years maybe, or something like that.
So some of the systems that you're working on that would be topical rather than inside the body, we might see those first?
Those could be seen first. Yes, yes, yes. As long as they don't deliver anything, or yeah, those could be seen first.
What is it that makes them so biocompatible with the human body? Are these proteins that we have in our bodies?
Well, it's actually there's actually a long history of biocompatibility with silk. Silk sutures have been used for a long time, for a long time, for over 100 years, in fact, and they still remain a very widely used suture. The difference between the sutures and our material is that we actually clean up somewhat our material. The sutures still have sericin, which is the glue that kind of holds together the two fibers that are spun out of the caterpillar, and then these sutures are waxed in general, and so they actually elicit between an inflammatory response. We remove the sericin in the process of recuperating, of going to our liquid silk. So in the process of actually extracting the fibroin, and it turns out that then the protein is very non-inflammatory through the ways that we've seen it. And there are a lot of explanations that are due to the hydrophobicity of the extreme hydrophobicity of the protein, to the way that the materials are processed, and to how they degrade and so forth. But
so, do you have any examples, perhaps some prototypes that you could show us?
The thing that I always show is an old diffractive optics card there was an old card that actually was distributed at trade shows, at Clio, in fact, and so you can see here a bunch of micro lenses and phase masks. And this is an old digital optics polycarbonate card, but this is 100% silk. So this has been shown for the past couple of years. It has a lot of thumbprints, but basically it comes from this. So from our cocoons to this.
So I guess the fact that you've used these for a couple of years now means they're fairly durable.
That's one of the remarkable properties, is that you can tune the way that the materials last or the materials degrade through the chemical crosslinks of when the material is formed. So the more chemical crosslink, the stabler the material and the less degradable it is. And if the protein then goes from its liquid to its solid state without forming these crosslinks, so without forming beta sheets, then the material will melt in water. So you go from instantaneously degradable to very stable.
So what does your lab look like? Do you have a lot of these cocoons hanging?
We have a lot of boxes that are full of cocoons. We do have a couple of a few of the caterpillars too.
Oh, you do have caterpillars there?
We do have a couple of caterpillars, but mostly we get our cocoons from Japan, from China, from Cambodia. So.
And I've heard you say before, in addition to being water soluble and biocompatible, this material is also edible. So I'm wondering, what does it taste like?
Well, how do I politely answer that? It needs some barbecue sauce.
And do you envision any applications where people would actually eat this for any reason?
Well, so it really tastes like nothing. It's a little bit bland. It's a bit chewy. What some of the applications? So we did some work with the antennas. We did some work that where basically we put on a film of silk. We put some split ring resonators. And the split ring resonators, when interrogated, monitor what happens on the surface. And so the idea there is that the resonators are made of gold, which is basically edible. It's kind of like gold leaf in a fancy restaurant. And so instead of having just the gold leaf as garnish on food, we shape it as an antenna, and we put these appliques on cheese and on fruit and on whatever. So you could eat the sensor along with the food.
So would that be to tell if food had gone bad or something like that?
For example, yeah. So we have some examples in which we detect bacteria on the surface of cheese. The ripening of a banana, which is what I'm not advocating, is a very useful thing because we can all see a banana turn dark. But it was more more to prove a point. And with some colleagues that we've also done work on doing bacterial sensing on teeth. So applying these silk films with the antennas on the enamel.
And are some of these things that you mentioned, are you doing some of these under the Inspire grant that you received?
Some of the Inspire grant is more geared towards the fundamentals of the electronics. So the Inspire grant is going to take some of our previous work on the transient electronics platform and look at the fundamental issues that we have in trying to define rules, design rules, to build devices with this approach, and it's a very challenging task in a way because we're used to electronic devices or photonic devices for that matter that are immutable, and so here we have to try to design with the same rigor some devices that operate in a certain way with a material that changes. And so all these issues, for example, like surface interfaces and surface energy interactions between the protein films and the metal, and how one degradation affects the performance, and all these types of issues are going to be carried out.
But the electronics and nano antenna applications of the material, perhaps we might see those first because it doesn't have the rigorous FDA kind of approvals to go through?
Perhaps. I mean, all these various applications have their own idiosyncrasies in terms of bringing them to the market. So I think it's reasonable to expect that for non-medical applications, your time to a product might be sooner. Yeah.
Maybe 5 to 10 years.
I think 5 years is a good ballpark. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dr. Omenetto. So there was also another paper presented at FIO on the use of spider silk in optical applications. You can read more about Dr. Omenetto's research and that paper on photonics.com.